You know, I think the crooner was onto something when he sang, "What the world needs now is love, sweet love." I think we'd all agree that this world would be a lot better place if there was a lot more love. Well, actually, that thought is really not all that new. Way back in the beginning, in the Old Testament, God told us that we needed to love the Lord our God with all our heart and soul and strength. And in Matthew chapter 22, when they asked Jesus, "What's the great commandment?" He said, "Love the Lord your God, and the second one's like unto it, love your neighbor as yourself." And then Jesus told his disciples, "You need to love one another as I have loved you, so that the whole world will know that you're my disciples." So love's a pretty important thing. But love all by itself might get messed up sometimes. So Paul tells us in Philippians 1:9 that our love needs to abound within the context of knowledge and discernment. It is true that love left to itself can sometimes overflow the banks, and what we intended to be really good ends up like some kind of a train wreck. I remember when Marty and I were first married, way back when our budget was real skinny and we rarely had enough money to finish out the month. I remember driving by a florist and seeing this big advertisement for red roses, and immediately the romantic impulses rose in my heart, and I drove in and paid some obscene price for a dozen red roses. I couldn't wait to get home, and as I walked in, I did that old flowers behind my back, kiss on the cheek thing, thinking she would swoon. But she graciously accepted them and smelled them and thanked me for them. But I have to tell you, it didn't quite have the effect I thought it would have. So I followed her into the kitchen where she was putting them into water, and I said, "Didn't you like the roses?" She said, "Joe, I really love them, but I got to ask you a question. How much did they cost?" Suddenly I realized that my expression of love for her had totally misread her heart. Financial security was far more important to her than roses. And in retrospect, knowing that, how much better it would have been if I'd found a magazine someplace and cut out a picture of a dozen red roses and did the behind my back trick with the picture saying, "Babes, you know, I love you so much. If we had enough money, I'd give you a dozen red roses," and have her put it on the fridge and be reminded of my love. Well, that may be a little silly, but it does illustrate the point that love without knowledge sometimes can be problematic. So God tells us, when you express your love, do it in the context of knowledge, the knowledge of God's Word, which helps guide us in every situation of our lives, the knowledge of people who we're loving, and the knowledge of our own heart. So I'm a raving fan of love, and the world would be a far better place. But don't forget that God's Word tells us that when we express our love, we need to do it in the context of knowledge. Then our love will have great power.